All right, so today we're diving into some pretty potent strategy.
Oh, yeah.
We're unpacking crush your enemy totally. It's
Yeah.
one of the most maybe even controversial
Yeah,
laws from Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power.
definitely.
Now, before you go picturing us plotting world domination, let's make one thing clear.
Right.
This law is about understanding power dynamics,
Right.
not about endorsing, ruthless behavior.
Absolutely.
We're here to explore the how and the why.
Yeah.
And trust me,
Hey,
there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
The real brilliance of this law
Yeah.
is the psychology behind it.
Mm.
Greene argues that an enemy who's only partially defeated
Yeah.
is often more dangerous
Oh, really?
than one who's been totally crushed,
Okay, now why is that?
because they're fueled by the burning desire for revenge,
Oh.
just waiting for the moment to strike back.
Okay, so that's a thought-provoking concept.
Yeah.
That is almost counterintuitive. So how does this play out in the real world?
Absolutely.
Can you give us a historical example?
Let's rewind back to ancient Rome
Okay.
and Julius Caesar's relentless pursuit
Yeah.
of his rival,
Yeah.
Pompey.
Okay.
This wasn't just about winning a battle.
Mm-hmm.
Caesar understood that as long as Pompey was out there,
Right.
even in exile,
Yeah.
he posed a threat,
Okay.
a potential rallying point for Caesar's enemies.
I see.
By eliminating Pompey completely,
Mm-hmm.
Caesar removed any chance of future uprisings
Wow.
or challenges to his authority.
That's a pretty powerful example. It
Yeah.
shows how thinking ahead strategically
Mm-hmm.
can prevent future conflicts.
Definitely.
So when we talk about crushing,
Yeah.
are we always talking about complete annihilation?
Not necessarily. The
Okay.
goal isn't always literal destruction,
Right.
but about neutralizing the threat.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that might involve isolating your opponent,
Okay.
cutting off their resources,
Okay.
or dismantling their influence, rendering them powerless.
I see.
Think of it as a strategic game of chess.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes the best move is to outmaneuver your opponent,
Outmaneuver.
not obliterate them.
Okay. So it's less about brute force.
Right.
And more about calculated strategy.
Exactly.
Almost like a mental game of chess.
Exactly.
Okay.
Greene warns against using half measures,
Mm-hmm.
arguing they can backfire in a big way.
Oh.
Imagine trying to be nice in a conflict,
Yeah.
only to have the other side exploit your kindness to their advantage.
Oh.
You might end up inadvertently strengthening their position while weakening your own.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there at some point.
Yeah.
Trying to be the bigger person only to have it blow up in our faces.
Yeah,
Is there a historical example that illustrates this danger of half measures?
absolutely.
Okay.
Think about the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage.
Right.
The first two wars were brutal and costly for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of completely crushing Carthage after their second victory, Rome allowed them to rebuild.
Yeah.
This ultimately led to the Third Punic War,
Oh, wow.
where Rome finally fed up,
Yeah.
decided to completely obliterate Carthage,
Oh, my goodness.
leaving nothing but ruins.
Talk about a lesson learned the hard way.
Right.
It makes you wonder if Rome had taken a more decisive approach earlier on.
Yeah.
If they could have prevented a whole war and spared countless lives.
Exactly.
But let's jump ahead a few centuries.
Sure.
Can you give us a modern-day example of this crush your enemy philosophy in action?
If we look at the business world,
Okay.
Amazon's meteoric rise
Hmm.
and aggressive market dominance, a fascinating case study.
Okay.
They leverage their vast resources and infrastructure to undercut competitors,
Right?
often driving them out of business completely.
Wow.
It's a modern-day example of crushing the enemy,
Yeah.
albeit in a corporate context.
So is Amazon an outlier, or are there Amazon equivalents in every industry?
That's a great question.
And what about for our listener? What if they aren't running a multi-billion-dollar company?
Right.
Are there still enemies they should be thinking about?
That's a great question,
Yeah.
and it's one everyone should consider.
Okay.
The first step is identifying your enemies.
Right.
Think about the areas of your life where you feel stuck or frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
Are there specific people,
Okay.
habits,
Yeah.
or even limiting beliefs
Yeah.
that are holding you back from achieving your goals?
Okay, so identifying those enemies, those obstacles or challenges is the first step.
Exactly.
But before we all go on a crushing spree,
Yeah.
Greene does issue a warning, right?
Mhm.
It's not about being ruthless in every situation.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Crush your enemy totally is a powerful tool,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a license for unchecked aggression.
Right.
Think of it as a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
Okay.
It requires precision and strategic thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Overusing this law can alienate potential allies
Right.
and even create new enemies,
Yeah.
leaving you in a worse position than when you started.
So it's about choosing your battles carefully
Yeah,
and knowing when to apply this law strategically.
exactly.
When does crushing become counterproductive?
Think of Napoleon's disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812.
Oh, yeah.
His ambition to crush his enemies and conquer Europe led him to overextend his forces,
Mm-hmm.
leading to logistical nightmares and a devastating defeat.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that even in victory,
Yeah.
overreach can be your downfall.
Wow.
Sometimes a more measured approach,
Bro.
one that focuses on building alliances and consolidating power,
Right.
is the wiser path.
Okay, so we've talked about crushing in a literal sense,
Mhm.
defeating enemies, eliminating threats.
Right.
But Greene also points out that crushing doesn't always have to be physical or financial right.
That's an important point.
Okay, so what are some other ways this law can manifest?
Crushing can be about dismantling someone's influence,
Okay.
damaging their reputation,
Yeah.
or strategically outmaneuvering them so they no longer pose a threat.
So it's more about strategic brilliance and less about brute force.
Exactly.
Can you give us an example?
Imagine you have a rival at work who's constantly undermining you.
Okay.
Instead of a direct confrontation,
Mm-hmm.
you might focus on building stronger alliances with key decision makers,
I see.
subtly exposing your rival's flaws,
Okay.
or highlighting your own achievements.
Right.
It's about using your intelligence and understanding of social dynamics
Right.
to neutralize their threat without resorting to aggression.
This idea of strategic checkmate is fascinating.
Yeah.
But how does this apply to our everyday lives? Not everyone is facing a power struggle on the level of Caesar
Right.
or vying for dominance in the corporate world.
Right.
That's where it gets really interesting.
It does.
The enemies we face aren't always people. They could be bad habits,
Right.
self-sabotaging behaviors,
Yeah.
or even limiting beliefs that are holding us back.
Yeah.
Think about procrastination, fear of failure, or that nagging voice of self-doubt.
Right.
These are all enemies that we can crush using the principles of this law.
That's a great point.
So it's about applying this strategic thinking to our personal lives as well.
Absolutely.
Identifying those internal or external forces that are preventing us from reaching our full potential.
Precisely.
Okay.
Let's say you're struggling with procrastination.
Right.
Instead of letting it control you,
Yeah.
you can crush it by implementing strict deadlines,
Okay.
breaking down large tasks into smaller, more manageable steps,
Right.
or rewarding yourself for staying on track.
Okay, so instead of brute forcing our way through challenges,
Yeah,
it's about using strategy and calculated action to overcome them.
exactly.
This is really making me rethink my whole approach to personal growth.
Yeah.
But how do we know when we've successfully crushed an enemy?
Mm.
What does that look like?
It's about achieving a lasting resolution, ensuring that the threat has been neutralized and can't come back to haunt you. Think about it.
Okay.
Have you ever had a confrontation that wasn't fully resolved?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did it continue to weigh on your mind,
Totally.
creating tension and resentment?
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of unfinished business can be incredibly draining.
Yeah.
So what's the key to ensuring a truly decisive victory, whether it's against an external enemy
Right.
or an internal struggle?
It all comes down to being decisive in your actions.
Okay.
Don't let problems linger or fester.
Right.
Confront them head on.
Yeah.
Develop a clear plan
Mm-hmm.
and execute it with precision.
Okay.
Whether you're dealing with a difficult person,
Right.
a bad habit,
Yeah.
or a limiting belief,
Mm-hmm.
the key is to address the root of the problem
Okay.
and take decisive action to eliminate the threat.
And speaking of decisive action,
Yeah.
Greene also talks about the importance of avoiding loose ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
He argues that unresolved conflicts, even seemingly minor ones,
Right.
can come back to haunt you down the line.
That's a crucial insight.
Okay.
It's something we see play out all the time,
Right.
from personal relationships to international politics.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders who fail to consolidate power
Yeah.
because they allow rivals to linger or simmer with resentment
Right.
often end up facing challenges to their authority down the line.
Oh, I see.
It's like leaving a fire smoldering.
Oh,
It might seem contained,
right.
but it could reignite at any moment.
And on a personal level, it's about addressing those little conflicts or resentments
Right.
before they turn into major issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's having that tough conversation with a friend
Right.
or finally setting boundaries with a toxic family member,
Exactly.
those unresolved issues can drain your energy and prevent you from moving forward in a positive way.
Totally.
So whether you're dealing with a personal conflict or a major professional challenge, the key is to address it head on and aim for a resolution that leaves no room for future disputes.
Absolutely.
So it's about being assertive,
Mm-hmm.
setting clear boundaries,
Yeah.
and making sure everyone understands where they stand.
You got it.
But is there ever a time when showing restraint, even with a defeated enemy,
Yeah.
might be the wiser course of action?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And it speaks to the nuanced application of this law.
Okay.
Remember, it's not about being ruthless or vindictive.
Right.
It's about strategically eliminating threats.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that might involve extending an olive branch,
Oh, okay.
offering a path to reconciliation,
I see.
or even strategically allowing an opponent to save face.
So it's about being strategic and understanding the long game.
Exactly.
Sometimes a temporary truce or a show of goodwill can ultimately lead to a more favorable outcome down the line.
You got it.
I'm really starting to appreciate the depth and complexity of this law.
Yeah.
It's not just about brute force, but about understanding human psychology, strategy,
Yeah,
and the art of calculated action.
definitely.
But it also requires self-awareness, right?
Absolutely.
Understanding our own motivations and tendencies is crucial.
You need to understand your own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Your capacity for both strength and restraint.
Right.
To truly master this law.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about becoming someone you're not,
Right.
but about honing your existing skills and using them strategically.
All right. We've covered a lot of ground here.
Oh, half.
From Julius Caesar to Amazon,
About.
from historical battles to personal struggles, we've seen how the concept of crush your enemy totally
Right.
can be applied in a surprising variety of contexts.
Absolutely.
And the key takeaway is this.
Yeah.
It's not about embracing aggression or seeking out conflict. It's about recognizing that in the game of life,
Right.
there will be times when decisive action is necessary
Yeah.
to protect your interests, achieve
Absolutely.
your goals, and ensure your long-term success.
Right.
But it's also about understanding
Yes.
that there are many ways to crush an enemy. And sometimes the most effective approach
Right.
is the one that requires the most thought,
Exactly.
not the most force.
You got it.
Okay, we're going to take a quick... Okay, so before we were really getting into the strategic nuances of crush your enemy totally. We've seen historical examples, explored how it plays out in the business world, and even talked about applying it to our personal challenges.
Right.
But I have to admit, this whole crush concept, even when we're talking about bad habits or limiting beliefs, still feels a little intense. What about the ethical considerations?
Right.
Where do we draw the line between strategy and, well, just being ruthless?
You've hit on a crucial point,
Okay.
and it's one that often sparks debate. Some people hear crush your enemy totally
Yeah.
and immediately assume it's a blueprint for Machiavellian scheming. The ends justify the means approach to life.
Right.
But it's not quite that simple.
So it's not about throwing ethics out the window.
Exactly.
Okay.
Greene isn't advocating for a crush everyone in your path
Yeah.
mentality.
Right.
He's presenting a framework for understanding power dynamics, not a moral code.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that there are times when decisive action is necessary
Yeah.
to protect yourself, to achieve your goals,
Right.
or to prevent future harm. But that doesn't mean abandoning your principles or acting without integrity.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like having a powerful tool in your toolbox.
Right.
You don't use it for every single task, but it's there when you need it.
Yeah.
But how do we know when to use it?
That's a good question.
How do we navigate that gray area between strategic action and unethical behavior?
That's where discernment and self-awareness come in.
Okay.
Before taking any action.
Right.
Especially one as decisive as crushing an opponent, you need to carefully consider the context, the stakes, and the potential consequences.
Right.
Ask yourself,
Yeah.
what's the potential for collateral damage?
Okay.
Are there alternative solutions that might be more ethical?
Right.
And most importantly,
Yeah.
are you acting in alignment with your own values, and principles.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly.
Each situation requires careful consideration and thoughtful deliberation.
Right.
But let's get practical for a moment.
Okay.
If our listener is facing a situation where they feel like they need to crush an enemy, what are some concrete steps they can take?
First, you need to clearly identify who or what the enemy is.
Okay, so identifying the threat is step one.
Yeah.
Followed by intel gathering. What
Well,
kind of information are we talking about?
think like a detective.
Okay.
Understand your opponent's strengths, weaknesses, motivations, and likely strategies.
Okay.
What are their patterns of behavior?
Right.
What are their vulnerabilities? The more you know about your enemy,
Right.
the better equipped you'll be to devise an effective strategy.
It's like Sun Tzu's famous quote,
Yes.
"If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles."
Exactly.
So knowledge is power, but then what?
Right.
How do we take that knowledge and translate it into action?
Once you have a clear understanding of the situation,
Okay.
you can start developing your plan.
Mm-hmm.
This might involve building alliances, outmaneuvering your opponent,
Right.
exposing their weaknesses, or taking decisive action to neutralize their threat.
And it's important to remember that crushing doesn't always have to involve a head-on confrontation.
Right.
Or aggressive tactics.
Exactly.
Right.
Sometimes the most effective strategies are subtle and strategic. You might subtly undermine your opponent's influence,
Okay.
discredit their ideas,
Right.
or simply outperform them in a way that renders them irrelevant.
Oh, wow.
It's about choosing the approach that best suits the situation and maximizes your chances of success.
So it's about being clever, resourceful.
Yeah.
And maybe even a bit cunning.
You could say that.
It almost sounds like we're talking about a game of strategy, not a battle to the death.
You're catching on.
Okay.
The art of crushing your enemy totally isn't about brute force,
Right.
but about using your intelligence, your resources, and your understanding of human nature to achieve your objectives.
Okay, this is really helping me reframe my whole understanding of this law.
Yeah.
It's not about becoming a ruthless dictator,
Right.
but about being strategic, discerning, and ultimately taking control of your own destiny.
I like that.
But before we go any further,
Okay.
I think it's important to acknowledge that this whole crush concept
Yeah.
might feel a bit triggering for some listeners.
That's a valid point.
Okay.
The idea of crushing anyone, even metaphorically,
Right.
can evoke feelings of discomfort, unease, or even trauma.
Yeah.
Especially for those who have experienced violence or aggression.
Of course.
It's crucial to emphasize that this law is not intended to condone harm
Right.
or endorse unethical behavior.
Yeah.
It's a framework for understanding power dynamics, but it should always be applied with compassion, ethical consideration,
Right.
and a deep respect for the well-being of everyone involved.
Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome.
I think it's important for our listeners to know that we're approaching this topic with sensitivity
Absolutely.
and a recognition of the potential impact it might have.
Yeah. If any of our listeners are feeling triggered or are struggling with challenging situations,
Right.
we encourage them to reach out for support.
Of course.
There are resources available, and there's no shame in seeking help when you need it.
Now that we've addressed some of the ethical considerations and potential sensitivities, I'd love to explore a different side of this law.
Okay.
Is there a way to apply crush your enemy totally in a more positive and constructive way?
That's a fantastic question.
Okay.
And the answer might surprise you.
Oh, really?
While crush your enemy totally might sound aggressive on the surface,
Right.
it can actually be a powerful catalyst for personal growth resilience and even creative problem solving.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
Okay.
How do we go from crushing to personal growth?
It starts by reframing our understanding of enemies.
Okay.
Instead of viewing them as individuals we need to defeat, we can think of them as challenges, obstacles,
Right.
or even opportunities for growth.
I see.
For instance, instead of seeing a competitor as someone to crush,
Okay.
you could see them as a benchmark,
A benchmark.
someone whose success inspires you to raise your own game.
So it's a mental shift.
Exactly.
Instead of feeling threatened, we can choose to feel challenged, even inspired.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about harnessing that energy and channeling it in a positive direction. This reframing allows you to tap into your creativity, resilience, and inner strength.
This is really resonating with me.
Yeah.
It's like taking that feeling of being crushed by circumstances and turning it into fuel for growth and transformation.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And that's where this concept of crushing takes on a whole new meaning.
Right.
You're not destroying an external enemy, but rather overcoming an internal obstacle,
Yeah.
whether it's fear, self-doubt,
Right.
or a limiting belief that's been holding you back.
Okay, so we're talking about crushing those inner demons.
Exactly.
I love that imagery.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it speaks to the transformative power of this law. By crushing those negative thoughts, those self-sabotaging behaviors,
Right.
you create space for growth, for positive change,
Yeah.
and for the emergence of a stronger, more confident you.
So it's like we're taking back our power.
Exactly.
We're choosing to focus on what we can control, our own thoughts, beliefs, and actions.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this is where the concept of crushing becomes empowering, not destructive.
Right.
It's about taking charge of your own narrative and shaping your destiny. You're choosing to rise above the challenges, learn from them,
Right.
and emerge even stronger on the other side.
This is really making me rethink my whole approach to personal growth.
That's great.
It's not about avoiding challenges or hoping they'll magically disappear,
Right.
but about facing them head on and using those experiences to fuel our development.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think of a time when you faced a major setback,
Okay.
either in your personal life or your career.
Yeah.
Maybe you felt like you'd been crushed by the situation. But looking back, did you learn from that experience?
I think so.
Did it force you to reassess your goals, develop new skills, or discover hidden strengths you didn't even know you had?
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
There have been times when those crushing experiences have ultimately led me to make positive changes and become more resilient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those setbacks, those challenges
Right.
can actually be incredible catalysts for growth.
Okay, so we've seen how crush your enemy
Totally.
can be applied in a more positive and constructive way.
Yeah.
But let's be real, not all conflict can be resolved with a crush or be crushed mentality.
Right.
What about the power of forgiveness? What role does that play in resolving conflict?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Forgiveness and reconciliation are incredibly powerful tools, and sometimes they're the key to achieving true and lasting resolution. Remember, crush your enemy totally is a framework for strategic thinking, but it's not the only approach.
Yeah.
There's a whole spectrum of responses to conflict,
Okay.
and the most effective one will depend on the situation and the individuals involved.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's about decisive action, and sometimes it's about compassion and understanding.
Exactly.
Okay.
There are times when a firm stance is necessary, when you need to set clear boundaries and protect your interests.
Right.
But there are also times when forgiveness and reconciliation can lead to more positive and enduring outcomes. Right.
The key is to approach each situation thoughtfully and choose the path that best aligns with your values and goals.
Okay, so we're not always talking about an either-or situation.
No, not at all.
There's nuance here, and it's about choosing the approach that makes the most sense given the circumstances.
Precisely.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that forgiveness and reconciliation are not signs of weakness,
Right.
as some might think. They require strength, courage, and a willingness to let go of anger, resentment,
Right.
and the desire for revenge.
Yeah.
It's about choosing to move forward in a positive direction,
Okay.
both for your own well-being and for the sake of the relationship.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
But for some people, the idea of forgiving,
Yeah.
especially when they've been deeply hurt or betrayed,
Right.
might seem impossible. How do we cultivate that strength and courage
Yeah.
to forgive?
That's a good question.
Where do we even begin?
It's a journey, and it's unique for each person.
But one of the most important things to remember is that forgiveness is not about condoning the actions of the other person.
Okay.
It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment that you're carrying.
Right.
It's about choosing to let go of the past and move forward with your life.
So it's almost like a gift we give ourselves.
You could say that?
We're not doing it for the other person, but for our own peace of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Holding on to anger and resentment only hurts you in the long run.
Yeah.
It affects your thoughts, your emotions, your relationships, and even your physical health.
Oh, wow.
Forgiveness is about releasing that negativity and creating space for healing and growth.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what about situations where the other person hasn't apologized or shown any remorse for their actions?
Right.
Can we still forgive them?
It's definitely more challenging,
Okay.
But it's still possible to forgive, even in the absence of an apology.
Mm.
Remember, forgiveness is ultimately about your own internal state,
Okay.
not the other person's behavior.
Right.
It's about choosing to release the pain and resentment that you're holding on to,
Yeah.
regardless of whether the other person acknowledges their wrongdoing.
So even if they don't deserve forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
we can still choose to forgive for our own benefit.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened
Right.
or condoning the other person's actions.
Mhm.
It simply means choosing to move forward without being weighed down by the past.
Yeah.
It's about releasing the anger and resentment that's preventing you from living a more peaceful and fulfilling life.
Wow. This is really profound stuff.
It is.
It's making me rethink my whole approach to conflict and forgiveness.
That's great.
It's not about being weak or letting people walk all over you,
Right.
but about taking control of your own emotional well-being
Exactly.
and choosing to let go of negativity that's no longer serving you.
You've got it. And it's important to remember that forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It's a process, and it might take time.
Right.
Be patient with yourself and allow yourself to feel whatever emotions come up.
Yeah.
But ultimately, forgiveness is about choosing freedom over resentment,
Mm.
peace over turmoil,
Yeah.
and love over hate.
Wow.
It's about creating a more positive and harmonious life for yourself,
Okay.
both internally and in your relationships with others.
This has been an incredible conversation.
It has.
We've gone from ancient battlefields to the boardroom to the battlefield of our own minds.
Well, yeah.
We've explored the power dynamics of crush your enemy, totally, grappled with the ethical considerations,
Yeah.
and even discovered the transformative power of forgiveness and reconciliation.
It's been a journey through the complexities of human interaction,
It has.
and I hope our listeners are feeling empowered to apply these principles in their own lives, whether they're facing external challenges or internal struggles.
Yeah.
The key takeaway is that they have the power to choose their response,
Right.
to act strategically, and to ultimately shape their own destinies.
Okay, I think we're ready for a quick. Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into Crush Your Enemy. Totally. We've covered a lot of ground, from the historical roots of this law
Yeah,
to its surprisingly nuanced applications in our modern lives.
absolutely.
I feel like I've gained a whole new arsenal of strategic tools.
Oh, that's great.
But honestly, I'm also feeling a bit more introspective.
Okay.
Like, I need to take a closer look at the enemies within myself.
It's fascinating how this law can spark both strategic thinking and personal reflection.
Yeah.
It pushes us to examine the forces, both internal and external, that are shaping our lives.
Right.
And it encourages us to take a more proactive role in shaping our destinies.
So as we wrap up, what are the key takeaways you want our listener to walk away with?
Okay.
If they only remember one thing from this entire deep dive, what should it be?
I'd say the most important thing to remember is that crush your enemy totally is not a blueprint for aggression or ruthlessness.
Right.
It's a framework for understanding power dynamics,
Okay.
for recognizing and neutralizing threats,
Right.
and for achieving decisive victories in all areas of life. But it's also about understanding that true power lies in choosing the right approach
Okay.
for each situation, whether it's decisive action, strategic maneuvering, or even forgiveness and reconciliation.
So it's about being proactive, discerning, and strategic in our approach to challenges.
You got it.
And it's about understanding that there are many paths to victory, not just one right way.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that conflict is inevitable, but that we have the power to choose how we respond.
Right.
We can react impulsively,
Yeah.
or we can take a step back, assess the situation, and develop a calculated plan of action that aligns with our values and goals.
We've seen how that plan of action might involve a very direct crushing approach,
Right.
or it might involve more subtle strategies like outmaneuvering, discrediting, or even strategically forgiving.
Absolutely.
It really expands the whole definition of what winning looks like.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most effective way to crush an enemy is to transform them into an ally.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Think about it.
Okay.
Turning a former adversary into a collaborator
Right.
can completely shift the power dynamic and create opportunities for growth and innovation that you wouldn't have imagined before.
That's such an intriguing idea.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So understanding our adversaries, their motivations and their vulnerabilities can actually open up new possibilities for collaboration and mutual benefit.
Absolutely. By
Wow.
studying your enemies and understanding what drives them, you can often find common ground, identify areas for cooperation,
Yeah.
and even forge strategic alliances that benefit both parties.
Okay.
It's about seeing conflict not as a zero-sum game,
Right.
but as an opportunity for creative problem-solving and mutually beneficial outcomes.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It has been.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of conflict, competition, and even the nature of power itself.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's not just about dominance or control,
Mm-hmm.
but about using our intelligence, our resources, and our understanding of human nature
Right.
to navigate the complexities of life and achieve our goals.
You got it.
So as we wrap up, what would you say to the listener who might still be hesitant to embrace this law?
Okay.
Maybe they feel like it's too aggressive
Yeah.
or conflicts with their personal values.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give them?
I'd say this.
Okay.
Crush your enemy, totally, is not a call to become a ruthless tyrant.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we all have enemies, obstacles, challenges,
Yeah.
and even internal struggles that we need to confront in order to grow and succeed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also about understanding that there are many ways to crush those enemies. Sometimes it's about decisive action.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about strategic maneuvering.
Right.
And sometimes it's about forgiveness and reconciliation.
So it's about being wise and discerning.
I think so.
It's about choosing the approach that's both effective and aligned with our values.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about being thoughtful, intentional, and compassionate in our approach to conflict and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about remembering that the ultimate victory is not about defeating others,
Right.
but about mastering ourselves, about becoming the best versions of who we can be.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's not about crushing others, but about conquering our own limitations and rising to meet the challenges that life throws our way.
It's been a pleasure exploring this law with you.
Likewise.
And I hope our listeners have found it as thought-provoking as we have.
And remember, listeners, the conversation doesn't end here.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, and your own experiences with this law.
Absolutely.
Share your insights in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going.
Until next time, stay curious, stay strategic,
Yes.
and remember the power to shape your destiny lies within you.